The 1980 Ford Thunderbird was significantly downsized over its predecessor. However, it still attempted to lure its buyers with the same type of luxury features as the car it replaced. In this episode, we're going to take a closer look at the 1980 to 1982 Ford Thunderbird and how it helped Ford achieve its goal in making its personal luxury coupe more efficient. So grab an Arizona green tea, kick back, and let's get down to the nitty-gritty. In its seventh generation, from 1977 to 1979, the Ford Thunderbird was a major hit in terms of sales. Between these model years, just a tick below 1 million units were sold. Although Ford had a winner on its hands with this particular Thunderbird, American auto manufacturers would soon be on a trend of downsizing their cars to smaller, more efficient models. In the American automobile industry, downsizing was a direct response to the 1973 oil crisis, which resulted in the enactment of corporate average fuel economy standards in 1975. By the beginning of the new decade, 1980, each auto manufacturer producing cars for sale in the United States were required to produce an average of 20 miles per gallon across their entire product line. So, as larger cars, such as the 1979 Thunderbird, reached the final year of its product cycle, it would be replaced with a scaled-down model, one that weighed less, with improved fuel efficiency. And despite being scaled down, the newer model would retain a rear-wheel drive layout and will offer the same type of personal luxury, although in a smaller, more efficient package. 1980. This would mark the first model year of the 8th generation Ford Thunderbird. The newly redesigned coupe was a long wheelbase variant of the rear-wheel drive Ford Fox platform. The new T-Bird was a little more than a nicely dressed up two-door Ford Fairmont. Compared to its predecessor, the new T-Bird slimmed down tremendously, being 17 inches shorter, 4 inches narrower, while riding on a wheelbase 6 inches shorter than the outgoing car. Overall, the new car shed hundreds of pounds. For 1980, the new Thunderbird had a unibody structure. On the other hand, the 1979 version had a more conventional body-on-frame structure. From a design standpoint, the side profile of the new car was dominated by a long hood and a short deck lid with a vinyl roof. The previous 77 to 79 model was a major hit, and Ford had its fingers crossed, hoping for that type of success to carry over for the 1980 version. So, while under development, the designers took notable styling cues from that previous T-Bird, such as concealed headlamps, rectangular grille, tail lamps, and opera windows, and transferred those styling cues onto the new 1980 T-Bird. The execs at Ford assumed that imitating the previous iteration while offering it in a smaller package would perhaps allow the 1980 Thunderbird to retain the sales volume of its predecessor. For example, gazing at the rear, one would notice a nice and rather large full-width tail lamp assembly. These were an evolution of the ones found on the previous 1979 version. Up front, there was a huge grille and stylish concealed headlamps, yet another design cue carried over from its previous iteration. However, this time, they were a bit different. These are often mistaken for composite headlamps, and looking at the car from a distance, the wraparound light effect gave the appearance of modern composite headlamps. However, in 1980, those were not yet approved for US roads. Although plenty of other places were already using composite units during this time, American cars were limited to the sealed beam units. The first composite lens would not appear until the Lincoln Mark VII. For 1980, prospective buyers could choose from 3 models: the base Thunderbird Coupe, the higher spec Town Landau Coupe, and the top-line Silver Anniversary Coupe, which was a special edition. The Thunderbird Coupe and Thunderbird Landau Coupe would carry over to 1981 and 1982. There would be a new top-of-the-line model for 81 and 82. On the inside, the new T-Bird didn't skimp on luxury. Despite being a downsized model, the new car still delivered what customers demanded from a personal luxury coupe with plush, comfy seats, not to mention power and convenience accessories. As an option, the Thunderbird was offered with heavy-duty handling suspension, a limited slip rear axle, and aluminum wheels equipped with Michelin TRX tires. Outright performance was not prioritized, so the engine output numbers were not staggering by any means. For instance, the 4.2-liter V8 generated 115 horsepower, and the optional 5-liter variant generated 131 horsepower. Despite those modest numbers, Ford met its efficiency goal with the new 1980 model. Being significantly lighter, the new car was not only quicker than the one it replaced, but there was even a fuel economy improvement of nearly 15%. Later for the 1980 model year, a 6-cylinder joined the engine lineup for the Thunderbird. The newly introduced 3.3-liter inline-6 was also shared with the Fairmont and Granada, just to name a few, and was paired with a 3-speed automatic. The inline-6 wheezed out a miserable 87 horsepower, but let's keep in mind this was part of the effort in downsizing and making the car more fuel efficient. By 1982, the 302 engine was dropped, leaving the 4.2-liter as the primary V8. Ford's 4.2 output rating varied for California and non-California markets. Fitting in right between the inline-6 and the 4.2 was a newly introduced 3.8-liter V6. The engine generated a bit below 120 horsepower, and yes, this was an earlier version of the well-known Essex V6. In various forms, this was the engine that would power the Taurus and eventually the SN95, just to name a few. It would even stick with the Thunderbird until the car would finally be dropped in 1997. To put it bluntly, the 80 to 82 Thunderbird was not the success Ford had hoped for. For instance, in 1979, Ford sold nearly just as many T-Birds for that one model year as it did with a new model from 1980 to 1982 combined. By 1981, the demand for the Thunderbird had dropped, with production being a tick over 86,000 units. The following model year, 1982, would be even less, with just a tick over 45,000 units being produced. The execs knew this. However, a plan was already in motion to replace the 8th generation model as soon as feasible. The new replacement model would progress in terms of styling and shun the antiquated features. For instance, this time around, there would be no old-fashioned concealed headlamps, no Landau tops, or white sidewall tires. After all, the 8th generation Thunderbird was designed in the 1970s, a time when things like that were more popular. However, by the time the 1980s were well underway, customer taste was evolving. That new model expeditiously hit the market as the new 9th generation Thunderbird. The new for 1983 T-Bird had a more modern appearance this time around, with its exterior being completely redesigned from the ground up, without any of the old-fashioned styling cues. The new 1983 Thunderbird was well received and went on to become popular amongst consumers. Unfortunately, this generation Thunderbird usually gets a lot of criticism. The previous 1979 model was deemed quite large, heavy, not to mention fuel thirsty, although still selling in great numbers. And from a design standpoint, Ford saw the retention of that previous model's styling cues as justifiable since it was such a hot seller. The 1980 car might not have been a sales success like its predecessor, but either way, Ford met its goal of making the 1980 car more efficient. As always, thanks for coming out to the show, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Until next time, this is your host Rob, and thanks for tuning in to Antique Tags.